Hello. Right. Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Poonam Malik. I'm a fellow and Vice President Business, Economy and Enterprise for the Royal Society of Edinburgh, and chaired the Economy and Enterprise Committee, the work of which, together with Prosper, that we are discussing today. Thank you for coming. And it's a pleasure, welcome on behalf of RSE and Prosper together here. So just to give you some logistics, the event is being live streamed. So those of you in the room, welcome, and those of you online, welcome as well. For any questions towards the end of the session, please note that you can ask questions, and then we will be able to pick it up. So roughly we'll have half an hour of session and then question and answer. So get your question answer session together. In terms of, I suppose, slides, the report that we are launching, who's picking up the slides? Yeah, okay. So we have gathered here today for the launch of report. You can see the QR code and download it. A physical copy in today's world of digital. This is here. Productivity, the micro challenge that we are talking about. And in terms of, it was a joint collaboration work between RSE's Economy and Enterprise Committee and the Prosper. In terms of the topic that we are talking about, private sector productivity in the UK has dropped 0.6% in 2024. It is 0.7% below 2019. So we are not going upwards, we are going down. Public sector productivity declined by 0.2% in 2023 and 0.3% in 2024. Again, the trend is not looking positive. If productivity remains low, UK would need 92,000 more public sector workers by 2030, costing the economy $5 billion. And there seems to be a big innovation gap for SMEs. Only 32% of Scottish SMEs agree that they are innovation active. In terms of G7, UK lags behind in SME productivity. 1% SME productivity lift could add 94 billion to the GDP over the next 5 years and 65,000 extra profit per annually. So these numbers are very stark and implications wide. So with that objective of working together with business, academia, and government, Royal Society of Edinburgh's Economy and Enterprise Committee, under the convenership of Professor Jeremy Peat, who was my predecessor in the role, over the past year have worked on various challenges on productivity. There were 3 E's program: equity, economy, and economic efficiency, and energy. We have delivered a series of productivity under that heading with the Productivity Institute. Professor Bart Van Ark held a session here at RSE. Then next morning, we held a roundtable. Summary of those findings are available on the Royal Society website if you are interested. Once we did a little bit work on the macro level, the next question that emerged is what's happening at the micro level. And that's where the collaboration with Prosper happened. Prosper have been working in the field of working with small and medium enterprises in Scotland to reach their productivity through their program PeerWorks. And they address how to look at SME productivity. So tonight's session is part and culmination of that piece of work. By no means it is the end of work, because that's what we are looking to do. So in this session, we will hear from Jo, who's an RSE fellow. She'll summarize the report findings. Then next we'll hear from Claire, and then the case studies coming in. So our first speaker today is Jo Armstrong, former member of Economy and Enterprise Committee, and under that, she was working with the team on this particular work. Jo?
You've elevated me. I'm not a fellow, but I've definitely been involved with RSE quite a bit. I was pleased to be asked. I was actually pleased to be asked by Jeremy Peat, your predecessor. Jeremy and I go back a long way. I worked with Jeremy when we both worked in the RBS, so that dates me, dates him, and gives you an idea of the sorts of things we get involved with, because we're both microeconomists. And so the issue about productivity, there's been a lot it's actually kind of almost like it's the holy grail at the moment, is that we need to get productivity. Everybody's talking about it. Nobody can actually find the answer to it. And it tends to get talked at the macro level. And when I first thought about this idea, working with Prosper, when I talked about it with Jeremy, and actually when I talked with Claire, it was like, well, we can't measure what we do at the macro level, so we can't show it's worthwhile doing. So I'm not quite sure how you're going to be doing something around this space. And given what I know what PeerWorks does and what the desire that Prosper has in that space, I thought, no, we really, really do need to give it some sort of airing. We need to give it some sort of support, because it is, to me, an extremely cost-effective, I won't say cheap, because you don't want to be cheap, a cost-effective way of actually engaging with the vast majority of our companies, which are SMEs. So a lot of the activity that goes on targets either high-tech, not wrong, or helps large companies, because if we don't help them, they'll walk out the country and they'll go to another part of the UK or another country. And SMEs tend to be the unsung hero, because they're the ones that provide the jobs. They're the ones that provide kind of place-making activities, because they're actually located in place. And they have a longevity to them, because even if one doesn't survive, there's others there to maintain productivity, to maintain growth, to maintain employment. So I think there's an imperative here to see what this does, to understand why it's important, and to understand possibly the challenges about why it's not got a greater airing or a stronger presence in Scotland. So for the last 2 years, Jeremy and I and Claire and Eleonora and others have been trying to find a way of engaging, finding a way of making this PeerWorks more visible and an understanding as to why it's important. So I want to go back and just pick up a couple of the points that Poonam said there about productivity. Why is it so important? Well, I think it's important to put into context. Over the last, since the last 10 years, last 12 years, GDP growth per hour has grown by 0.5 percentage point. And that is significant because it actually has an effect on what we get through our tax take and what's available for public sector spending. And if we're talking about public sector spending, that's where you start to see the challenge around the benefit structure, the ability to deliver our financial, the services that we all need as an ageing population, the services that we need as an economy that can't be paid for without taxes, either delivering funding or ability to borrow more. I'll come back to the borrowing in a minute. So the challenge that the UK is facing, the challenge Scotland's facing, is our growth rate is woefully low. Now, within the period I've described there, we clearly had the pandemic, we've clearly had economic challenges to the cost of living crisis, we've clearly had domestic and international political turmoil. And it's not unique to the UK and it's not unique to Scotland. But if you're a slow growth economy, you don't have resilience when you've got economic shocks. And I think probably we're seeing economic shocks almost certainly annually, if not more frequently than that, because the pandemic forced us to front fund or draw in the revenues we think we were going to get from taxes to fund the pandemic furlough schemes. The ability to make sure that we've got sufficient funding to support businesses now as we deal with the challenges in the public sector, be that health, be that in other parts of the public sector, social care. The ability to deliver those services are predicated on having enough public sector revenues, enough taxes, and if we've got low growth, then that makes that almost not impossible, but it creates a challenge for the public sector and it creates a challenge for politicians. And politicians don't like challenges, and we've seen in the last couple of weeks, when challenged, the expectation of reducing public spending has just crumbled, which doesn't actually make the problem go away, it's just pushed it down the track, because at some point the markets are going to start to create an impact, an effect on that, and that likely we're beginning to see that coming through in either higher borrowing costs and or an inability to actually borrow more. So the challenge that the economy faces, the challenge that the UK government and the Scottish government faces is the level of productivity that we have is insufficient to deliver the revenues needed for the demand and the expectations we all have as citizens about the services that we want. Productivity, one might argue, is not the only answer, but it's a pretty important answer, or a pretty important issue. Again, if I draw on the evidence given to us, or evidence available to all from the Productivity Institute, who we worked with quite closely, Professor Bart Van Ark and Professor Steve Roper from Warwick University, showed us that if you haven't got productivity, then which is the single driver of economic growth, and living standards and societal well-being is seriously under stress. It represents the efficiency with it which inputs, labour and capital can be converted into outputs, and that gives us the standards of living, tax revenues for services. It allows us to be innovative and competitive, and allows us to have some sort of regional resilience. So productivity is absolutely fundamental to our living standards, to our abilities to provide our services, and the ability for us to be a caring and well-being society. In undertaking this piece of work, we focused on the work that was an extensive body of work by the Productivity Institute, which, if I quote again from their work, the issue that we have in Scotland is that we have predominantly SMEs, small, medium-sized enterprises. They make up the vast majority of the country in terms of employment and in terms of jobs, but they are, the data would suggest, it's the SMEs, not the top 10%, it's the middle three quarters that are actually having a poorer productivity record than the top 10. So there's something's happened in the last 10 years that would suggest that the middle sector of our economy is not being as productive as it could otherwise be. If the middle sector were as productive as the top level, we wouldn't be having this productivity challenge. So there's something going wrong within the economy that gives us a need to look at why can't that middle group not perform as well as the top 10% of firms. We started to look at, or the Productivity Institute has looked at, whether it's structural factors or whether it's organisational factors. And traditionally, productivity challenges have come around structural factors, and we've seen plenty of public sector interventions to improve infrastructure, to improve connectivity, to improve direct foreign investment, or encourage direct foreign investment as a means to increase productivity. But the data suggests to date that it's no longer structural factors. So it's not about the size of the firm. It's not actually about the sector that it's in that we've got, although there's clearly some sectors that are more productive than others. So, for example, oil and gas and financial services have typically been more productive than others. But it now looks like it's organisational factors. It's now about the ability of the individual firms themselves to understand what's needed and then implement what's needed to make the difference. The expectation is that's as a consequence of moving from more likely a manufacturing sector to one that's a service sector. So the key factors that I think Peerworks looks at is how can they help the individual firms. Because if it's about organisational impediments, organisational challenges that are in reducing productivity potential within Scotland, then is there something that Peerworks is doing that's helping work at the firm level that's actually increasing the potential for those firms to improve their productivity? And if they produce and act as well as the top 10% in the economy, then productivity would be substantially improved across the whole sector. So the issues that the research that the Productivity Institute have identified that are critical for us, and issues that are actually at the heart of what Peerworks does, is around things like management, is around innovation, and it's around diffusion of innovation. And I know our speakers that are here tonight are going to talk probably about those three factors too. So I touch first of all on leadership. Management leadership does still matter. Yes, it's been an issue that's been important at the macro level, and we've seen plenty of initiatives, plenty of opportunities for government bodies to intervene and support management training, educational training. for leadership development. So that's still important. The issue is the extent to which that leadership training, the opportunities for that leadership training is actually fit for purpose for SMEs. I don't want to put words in our mouths, but certainly two of our speakers this evening are going to be saying there's an issue around, can I get my headspace out of running my day-to-day job, running my business, keeping it fit for purpose, and get into the space which is forward-looking and thinking more widely and more strategically. So the evidence suggests that the leadership training and the leadership opportunities that are out there may not be fit for purpose for the SMEs that we're trying to target. Implementing, for example, implementing new AI technologies or implementing new IT systems or taking into account all the kind of cyber risk issues that are out there, the cost of doing that, the ability to understand the need to do it and the ability to actually then manage that is not insignificant. And if you're also the owner, manager and chief cook and bottle washer, the chances of you being able to take on board all those, all the up-to-date technology and up-to-date learning that's out there, well, I know many hours in the day you're going to have. So the PeerWorks idea is about actually trying to bring people into the room to help them navigate their way through what's out there. It is about helping leaders be fit for purpose leaders in an SME world and up to date with what's out there as well. If you're also planning to make sure you're fit for purpose when you've got challenges on your hands, you're not then using that time to be thinking strategically. So there's a real challenge about what training, what learning, what development opportunities are needed for SME managers, owner managers, in a world where it's very bite-sized, not bite-sized things, very large traditional learning modules that large firms can do, and the top 10% clearly can do that. It's also about not just managing your cash on a day-to-day basis, it's also about how innovative can we be and how innovative do you need to be, and probably how do you know you need to be innovative. So it's again about learning about what innovations are out there, and then thinking through how does that fit my business, and then thinking through how could I take that forward, and then how could I make sure I don't bet the business in doing so. So it's again about how do you encourage innovation in a safe way, but challenging way to help companies, SMEs in Scotland find their way to make sure that they are fit for purpose for the future, not just even for today. And they've also got to be capable of coping with black swans. So I suspect the national insurance increase is a black swan for most folks in this room and most folks in the SME sector. How on earth would you be able to cope with and plan for that likely challenge in your cash flows? And then the final area that this research identified was about ability to learn from the knowledge that others have. So I know that we've all been in the past encouraged to go to networking and learn about what other people are doing, but the Prosper PeerWorks interventions are about listening to and being able to speak to and understand from people who've been in their space, been in their shoes, and learned what works, and more importantly, and learned what didn't work, so that they don't make the same mistakes. So it's about the diffusion of knowledge is a key part of helping SMEs raise their productivity levels. And again, that's where I think the PeerWorks networking provides a significant benefit for SMEs, and something that I think merits a wider presence in Scotland. That's primarily what I wanted to pick up, Poonam. There are reports that are coming out tomorrow. There are also the Productivity Institute's important to read. There's a body of evidence in there that tells us the micro issues are probably as important nowadays than the macro ones, but we tend to think about macro as the solution because that's what feeds through to GDP figures. But I hope the PeerWorks taster we're going to get gives you a feeling that there's more to than the macro world. Poonam.
Thank you, Jo. That's quite a detailed summary of what the report is. You can download it from the QR code. It's available, and we will have the next. I failed in my duties to give some housekeeping. There's no fire alarm planned, so if it does sound, please exit and head to the dome. That's where the assembly point is. And let's hope that it doesn't there. So Claire.
Hopefully you can hear me. So I'm Claire Reid, I'm Director of Policy and Public Affairs at Prosper. Some of you might also have known us as the Scottish Council for Development and Industry, and we've been around for over 90 years. Every 5 years, Prosper write a blueprint for the economy. We've actually just published our most recent one in the last couple of weeks. And it looks at the big challenges facing Scotland and proposes some solutions. In 2015, we identified this issue about productivity in Scotland, and we made 2 recommendations around how we could start to address it. One of the things that we picked up was the point Joe made about this sort of long tail of lower productivity in a big chunk of Scottish business. The recommendation that we made was to establish a network of productivity champions, to lead by example, to provide advice and encourage knowledge exchange around new ideas, and it would be a national programme and it would be cross-sectoral. So we were then invited by the Scottish Government to put forward a proposal how we could deliver that, and we've been delivering it, I think, for over 5 years. I'm looking at my colleague in the audience to remind me. It was rebranded along the way as PeerWorks. I can explain a bit more about why we rebranded it as well. Initially, it was a pilot in the Central Belt, but now it operates in 6 locations around Scotland, from the south of Scotland right up to Shetland, and we've done events in a variety of places, including recently Fife, Arbroath and North Lanarkshire. As I say, it's cross-sectoral, it's targeted at any business, and actually latterly any other organisation, so it's open to anyone really to come along. So we've had social enterprises, third sector organisations and others coming to learn as well and share their insight. And it's anyone really who wants to work. What we say is, if you want to work smarter, not harder in terms of changing your business, that's who's welcome to come to the club. The format is a host who introduces the topic. We usually have 2 case study speakers. One is always the business, because it is about that peer-to-peer learning. Sometimes it's a third sector organisation, as I've said. And then they'll share their journey in terms of whatever the topic or challenge or theme is, how they work through it, maybe some of the pitfalls. And some of the recent themes have included leadership and management, staff retention, hybrid working, digital adoption, sustainability and continuous improvement. The peer-to-peer learning aspect is unique to what we do at PeerWorks. There are elements of it in the wider business ecosystem, but this is really at the core of what we do, and we've honed our approach in developing how we make it a safe space for people to share over the last 5 years. And it's, as Joe said, it's grounded in evidence, lots of evidence about what is actually effective in triggering the people who come along to actually take action to change their businesses. Following the kind of presentation by the host and the case study speaker, the groups then break out into smaller discussion groups with topics proposed by the host, and at the end, attendees are encouraged to think about what actions they'll take when they go back to their organisations. We've currently got a membership of over 3,000, which has been growing over recent years. It's right across Scotland, all sectors and all geographies. And as Joe said, it's tackling some of the barriers that we know from sort of frequent surveys and feedback from our members, 2 of whom we have here today. It allows them to, take a bit of time back from day-to-day operations to think about more strategic issues, to perhaps take the first step in terms of embracing innovation. Quite often the challenges or the barriers to that are around perhaps understanding what the cost benefits are from adopting a new way of doing something, perhaps fears about reskilling their workforce to change how they do things. It's about creating that encouragement to implement change in their business through encouragement around effective change management. And it's that cross-sectoral knowledge exchange. So we're agnostic, any sector can come along. We have done some sector-specific events, but actually a lot of the benefit comes from people from different sectors, and we know that from the wider innovation systems anyway, that can be a really beneficial thing. And also it kind of opens up the silos that, people quite often say that they maybe go to events in their own sector, but they don't necessarily mix with other people in other sectors in their area. And we know it's kind of had other benefits. And it's also, as Joe talked about, avoiding some of the pitfalls of maybe more commercial networking, where people are just, perhaps they're just very actively looking for commercial opportunities rather than for a learning opportunity. It's been evaluated, I think, 4, possibly 5 times with positive impact. So we take case studies, we do regular surveys, and we look at the benefits both in terms of financial benefits, which are, as Joe alluded to, a little bit harder to estimate, as you might imagine, because you're asking someone who's perhaps come to 1 or 2 events minimum to say, you know, what have you done in your business and how has it had an impact? So sort of reaching those people who've maybe done things and sort of following them through the process can be a little bit more difficult than people who've maybe gone through a shorter, more focused programme. They've gone through 12 weeks, they might have had grant funding, there's an obligation to provide information. So evaluation is always a challenge, but actually I think we've done a really great job over recent years developing the evidence, and we've worked with colleagues in the Scottish Government to develop a logic model which sets out kind of what we're trying to change and how we do it. About 50% of attendees who attend just one event actually go away and do something in their business, which, you know, is good. And as Joe said, you know, the investment cost of that is actually quite modest. We know that there's still a gap in the market for this approach. You know, some people say like there are other things out there. Well, actually, 48% of people who attend our events have said they haven't gone anywhere in the last 6 months to get any support for the business. They might have asked a friend or family, but they're not getting support from anyone else. And as Joe said, the report really confirms the importance of looking at this kind of organisational level barriers and how we can support organisations to make change, as well as doing the structural things like the investment nationally. Sorry, is that my warning, Poonam? Sorry, I just realised that was what you were doing. Yeah. I'll increase my productivity and get to. I've only got another minute. So I think looking ahead, I suppose I would just conclude by saying, like, we think we're really excited about what we've been doing and what we've developed and the platform that we've created and the base that we've created and the learning that we've brought together. And, you know, the ongoing kind of continuous improvement, working with the Productivity Institute in terms of their academic evidence about what works, what can help firms and organisations, the feedback that we get from our members. So, like, we feel we've got an opportunity here really to shift the dial in terms of that organisational productivity, to unlock the productivity and prosperity in that middle section of firms, and that scaling and expanding this approach and giving it a kind of putting it on a longer term basis would really make a difference. Scotland can be a pioneer in taking a peer-to-peer approach. You know, we know it's been done in a couple of other countries. Belgium's done something, Norway's done something, but actually we could differentiate ourselves by really scaling this up for impact. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Claire, and that's very helpful. And we'll take questions after all the speakers. Next, we move on to 3 case studies. We have 3 guests who are example of literally how to put it in practice. And it's 5 minutes each, and I am going to ring this now because we are cutting into the question answer time. So Amanda is online, and I suppose we can, hello Amanda.
Hi there.
You're from Due North Creative. You're going to discuss a case study on improving leadership and management.
That's correct, yes.
Over to you. You are in the big screen, everybody can see you, so just, yes.
Cool. I'm going to turn my volume down because otherwise I can hear you guys in there. So wave when I've gone over. So good evening, everybody. I'm indeed Amanda Ingalls, and I'm the owner of Due North Creatives. I think I've probably met a few of you before, so I'm sorry that I'm not there tonight. Due North Creatives is a marketing agency that I essentially started in 2016 from my kitchen table in Montrose, really with the purpose of helping other ambitious Scottish businesses grow through straightforward, results-driven marketing. So over the years, we've transitioned from a lifestyle marketing business into an established agency with 8 full-time employees working across various sectors, from renewables and education to home development, manufacturing and technology. We began, like many micro businesses out there, as a small startup, you know, driven by a vision to really do more than just business. You know, my goal was to support local economic growth and really actually put businesses on the northeast of Scotland on the map. I was personally really passionate about that. But as we expanded, guess what? We encountered the challenges that many typical growing businesses face. You know, and I think what happens is it's so easy as a business owner to put your head down and get stuck in the day-to-day operations. However, it really doesn't help with accelerating growth in the long term. You know, stressful, overwhelming environments that we all face in a day-to-day environment can sometimes, it only enhances this. And our natural instinct, I suppose, as humans is to crave security and stability, in which case what we often do is put our head down further, which actually slows down the machine in order to gain control. You know, that's what we're doing. And however that might feel like the best thing at the time, what that does is it creates almost like a roller coaster effect. So you have the highs and then you have the lows where it slows down productivity while you gain control again, and then you speed up your growth again and then down. And this is why the productivity for me was like this. You know, there's lots of peaks and troughs. So now I'm almost 10 years into business, can't believe that, but there we go. And one of the biggest, most important learnings I've learned is that you need to lean into that difficult. But rather than doing it on my own, it's actually about lifting your head up and sharing experiences, challenges, and learnings with others in the business community. Why? Because you fix things quicker. You know, you actually need to share your own vulnerabilities, as it actually encourages others to open up with you and share their experiences. It takes down the walls, it reveals the truth. It's in that vulnerability that you realize that most people are actually wired to help others. So where they see your pain, they can't help but want to provide you with possible solutions. And this is where I really felt that PeerWorks was fantastic. You know, they create those regular environments where you can come and learn from other people in real life environments. It's not just about listening to PowerPoint presentations on how to do things. It's actually about probing workshop sessions that encourage you to reflect in small groups, which helps you to take learnings back into the business. It encourages you to periodically, I suppose, lift your head and look at the bigger picture. It challenges your current workings, and it's about doing business more strategically. This not only means that it flattens your roller coaster, but actually it helps you accelerate faster upwards. PeerWorks helped me a lot when I was building out process frameworks so that I could standardize the onboarding of new team members, to really ensure that quality remained high, and that's often really difficult in a creative environment. I also presented a case study session there on AI, sharing my experiences. However, I took a lot away from that session as well, where we worked on that workshop session, helping me to think out of the box and ensure that I stayed innovative with our own offering. PeerWorks to me attracts people who are serious about growth. They want to make an impact and they want to do it in the most efficient way possible. Success, I have learnt, isn't about figuring it out all on my own. It's actually not cheating to ask for help. I think that's a daft mindset that is created from school exam times. It's a smart thinking that will get you closer to your goals and quicker. Leadership, I've come to learn, isn't about having all the answers. It's about creating space for the right conversations. It's about setting the tone, being honest when things are hard and staying open to ideas that don't come from you. At Due North, we've grown so much stronger as a team because I've stopped trying to do everything myself. Instead, I've focused on developing our culture where everybody feels empowered to contribute, challenge, and improve. And that shift has made all the difference, not just in our results, but how it feels to work here and to exist within that business community. We feel proud. And I think it's about learning that leadership is a skill. It's not a title. You know, it's a muscle that we all have to work on, and one that can only grow when we're surrounded by others who are doing the same thing. It's why spaces, to me, like PeerWorks, where you're sharing things, your stories, are so valuable. It reminds us that we're not on our own when we're in the tough bits. And there's always somebody a few steps ahead of you or a few steps behind you to give you perspective on how much you've grown. I think when we as leaders develop in invest in our own development, the ripple effect on our team, our business, and everything around us can be actually incredible. That's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Okay, thank you for keeping to time. And next we have Gary Henderson from Grampian Fasteners, and you're talking about embracing innovation.
Yes, I am, thank you. I'm Gary Henderson, Managing Director of Grampian Fasteners. I sometimes struggle to explain just what Grampian Fasteners is about to people who are not in our industry. And I'm going to share something that I actually picked up from the Prosper Forum. One of the speakers was talking about the use of video conferencing during COVID. And one of the participants had said they felt like they were everywhere and nowhere all at the same time. And that was something that I just kind of picked up at the time. I thought that really explains what we are about as a business. We are distributors of industrial fasteners, and we've got customers in a whole range of sectors, from oil and gas, space, defence, construction, anyone who's kind of making, building things, fixing things are our customers. And those nuts, bolts, washers that they're using are around us all the time. They're around us now. It's just you don't see them. You only see the thing that they're part of. So when you think of Grampian fasteners, you think we're everywhere and nowhere all at the same time. But productivity is huge for us because we deal in a lot of low-value items, and you have to shift a lot of fasteners to make any money. So you really have to be productive. Don't get me wrong, we do specialist things that have value in them as well as exotic materials, but the bulk of our work is in the kind of low-value product. And what PureWorks really does for me is it gives me that space, as Joe said, to get away from my desk, to open my mind to new ideas. I find the best events are the ones that are completely unrelated to what I do. It just gives you that creative spark. And invariably, I will go back with ideas from these events to my business, and we'll start to look at systems and processes. And then where the technology comes in is we're kind of quite lucky as a business. We've developed all our own software in-house. So we are then able to implement those changes like really easily and really quickly for our business. An example of that was there was an event in Aberdeen called The Art of Networking by KLT Networking. And he was talking about business relationships. And out of that, I was able to kind of think, actually, we need to really think about our key account management process because we can change it quite drastically. So we went back, spoke to the team, spoke about the process, and then we were able to implement those changes again quickly. So that was something that we got straight away from PureWorks. But another route for innovation from technology is when a technology comes along and you can kind of pick that up and adopt it in your business. And that is much harder because you don't just want to adopt technology for technology's sake. But we have done things in our business over the years, things like handheld computers with barcode scanners, just OCR. Those are kind of examples of technologies that we've used. But I guess you wouldn't expect me to come and talk to you about technology and innovation and not mention AI. We don't actually use AI in the business structurally. It's kind of leaked into the business through some of our applications like email and just some of the staff using it for kind of research and content creation, but we don't really use AI. Our finance and admin manager went to a PureWorks event on culture, and she came back from that and said, oh, actually, we should really be looking at the business, the adoption of AI in the business. My response was, yeah, I kind of know that, and I have been looking. And I've got a background in technology as well, in computer science. So I had been looking, but I found it really difficult to know just where to start. It was just a huge topic. So the result of that was it gave me a bit of a nudge to go and look at what was out there, and I enrolled on a kind of AI intro course, which I'm still working my way through. So we're not using it at the moment, and I can see huge potential even for changing our whole business model, not just in kind of productivity gains, but the challenge is that the field is so vast that we're just not able to dedicate the time that it really needs to it. Again, as a business owner, there are so many other challenges that we're facing just now that grab your attention. We just can't do that, and I guess that's where we're at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you for honestly admitting that AI is not flying everywhere, but we do need to, and recognizing it, so we need to discuss. I was thinking we are almost towards the end and we have not discussed AI yet. Okay, so next up we have Neil and your box which you're discussing knowledge diffusion.
Yep. I'm Neil from Boxfish. I'm Managing Director now of the company. Our relationship with Peer Work started back in 2023. At that point, we just came out of the pandemic and we were kind of stagnating as a company. Not because of the pandemic, but we probably could look further back and see that our growth had become pretty anemic in the lead up to it. And it was mainly because the management team at the time were old, they were out of ideas, they'd sort of lost that passion for the business. So we made some changes, and one of those changes was that we had to get more productive. So at that point we were looking for opportunities to go out there and find like-minded people, organisations that could help us on that journey, and that's where Eleanor came in. So very quickly we kind of hit it off, and one of the things that we looked at was how can we tap into the network that you have to learn and to educate and to improve how we do things. And one of the interesting conversations that we had quite early on was around AI. Now, it's been touched on by most people here that it's complex, it's costly, it's difficult, and that was exactly what we found as well. We looked at it, we had a number of conversations, and we've done little bits and pieces, but we've never really moved it forward that far. What we did do in terms of knowledge diffusion was some of those organisations who were looking at AI, we were able to pick up different opportunities with them. And one of those opportunities was from Lewis, the communication agency. We do technical work, we're engineers, we're scientists, we like graphs, we like tables, we like calculations, facts and figures. And we recognised that a lot of our output was quite dry, quite boring, it wasn't telling the story. So instead of looking at the AI knowledge diffusion, what we quickly realised is we needed to look at the communication knowledge diffusion. And we engaged with Colette and then David and various others within that organisation. And what we're doing now is we're using them to take the facts and the figures, the numbers, the graphs, the sort of dry technical output, and using them to craft a story. And that knowledge diffusion that we've taken in from them allowed us to go back to clients and say, you're doing really good work here. You know, you're moving the dial forward in terms of net zero and sustainability. Let's shout. You know, let's put it on the website. Let's make press releases. You know, let's get the kudos and the benefit that you deserve. And that's been transformational for our business. So much so that we've moved from essentially a sort of West of Scotland focused organisation to now being active right across the UK and in Ireland with views to try and break into the continent as well. So well that idea, the kernel of it was on AI, it very quickly realised that there was other opportunities in there, and it was all thanks to the introductions that we've had from Eleanor and her team. So we're big advocates, you know, we want to do more, we want to help. We're still very early in that journey in terms of our productivity. But if we look back to when we started in 2013, we've measured it, and we're now 13% more productive than we were back then, when measured on the number of billable hours our staff book each year to clients. So it does work. That's across a number of different fields. That's some internal, some external. But it works, and we are eternally grateful. So thank you.
Thank you.
Realised everybody else ran over,
Okay.
so
You've given 1.35 seconds back. Okay, there you go. Right, so there we have it. You've heard the overview of the report that is launched today. I will show the face of it again. This is the report that we are talking about. And Joe highlighted the main work, how it went about. And then Claire's talked about the work that the peer work is leading. We've had three wonderful case studies from leadership management to innovation and knowledge diffusion. Now we are open to questions, and please start in the room as well as online, and Steph will keep me right if there are online questions. So please, state your name and then whoever you want to ask the question.
Sword. I'm retired. I used to run a company in Scotland. I'm slightly confused by the definition of productivity. On one side, I think it's growth. I hear from the panel growth. But my own experience, and I ran a productivity scheme, bonus scheme for staff in my company for 20 years, paid it quarterly or not, depending on improvement on productivity as I defined it. My definition was doing more with less. And I wonder what the panel's definition of productivity is.
Yeah, I think while I was sitting listening, that was going to be my first question, but thank you for highlighting it. And it's not that, I think it's just that does everybody's definition of productivity is same, and what do we understand by that? So I think, you in the end summed it in terms of a number, and that is another question that I was thinking when everybody was speaking. But yeah, it'll be a good, quick shout. What do you understand or mean by productivity when we say we need to increase it? Is it synonymous with growth, or is it something else, as you said, doing more with less?
Yes, you can do more with less, or you can do, you can do more with less, you can do the same with less, and you can do more with more. It's how you want to measure your own productivity, but it's being an honest, setting your metrics, setting your baseline effectively, and then monitoring against that. And obviously, if you've got scarcity of resources, you want to try and produce more with less, or produce more with the same, and that's a productivity improvement. So I don't think we're disagreeing with what your definition would be, but I think it's very much company-specific and sector-specific. Something wrong there?
Sorry,
Sorry.
No, I was just going to add as well. Sorry, there's only a few people in the room. So, but yeah, I think, just to build on that, I think we rebranded from Productivity Club to PeerWorks because of that issue, because people would say to us, well, we don't necessarily think about productivity in our business. We think about competitiveness. They think about all the other kind of like factors that you might measure business success on. And certainly some of the feedback we've had is around maybe like looking at kind of improved retention, meeting sustainability goals, etc. So what started out as, just something which might be seen just purely in terms of like doing more with less, is maybe more broad-based than just that. It's all aspects of competitiveness. And some of the companies that we work with don't just, they don't want to be just about growth. They quite often want to be about maybe impact as well in terms of the communities that they operate in. So they talk about scaling deep as well as scaling up. But I'm sure.
Thank you. Amanda, you wish to?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think that he's raised a really valid point, because I think when we start off in business, it's all about growing, and it's all about going after increasing turnover, and we get excited by bigger numbers, and we are kind of chasing our targets and things like that. And it's last year, I really felt like we went through a business change on that, and the fact that like I had to kind of set a challenge to the whole team of going, we've grown so much over the past 9 years. But what I've actually noticed is our profitability essentially hasn't gone up in line with that. And so it was this challenge to go, how do we improve this productivity when we look at our manpower and how we're systemizing things? And it made us look internal. I brought up about the process piece, but it was about making sure we were doing things the same, that there was standardized processes. And I think like there's a shift when you go through growth where you have to refocus back in, because what worked when you first started out has changed, and I think it's a really valid piece. Like now we are in a completely different place to where we were at this time last year, because we did that internal piece to look at productivity, to challenge how we were really delivering on a lot of our products. So I think you have raised a really valid point that it isn't just about growth, it's about internal productivity and processes and systemizing a lot of it so that you can scale.
Anyone else wish to add?
Yeah, we essentially sell time. That's what we do as a consultant.
Yeah.
And when we measure it, what we're looking at is how many hours can we bill out every month to our clients. And I think where we've seen an improvement is that our staff aren't necessarily working more time, they're just a lot more productive in terms of the output. So a lot of our products are essentially fixed price, so they can do more product, they can do more reports in the same time, which means that their productivity goes up, measured on the metric of the number of hours that we are charging out to the client.
Yeah.
So it's subjective because it's, that's for us, but we're pretty comfortable measuring it that way.
You wanted to add something?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. For me, it's about the output in relation to manpower, essentially. But I have this thing in the back of my head that there's a niggle that, when you talk about people and productivity, it's, well, everyone's lazy, therefore that's a problem. But most people come to work and they want to do a good job, and it's much more about the holistic systems that we create and create that. We talk about creating an environment a lot, but it's about creating that environment for people to do a good job, and that's where I think the productivity challenge is.
Yeah. I think you are all right to some extent in that when you said that probably growth is the result of being efficient, and the productivity ultimately is how efficient you are, not in terms of just people that they are not, but it's having those right processes, and that's where the technology comes in. Can it reduce your time on a particular task and be more efficient and effective? And that's what translates into. But in terms of business, eventually it results in growth of the business, whether it's in monetary terms or whether in terms of your objectives that you wish to achieve. Next question. Yes, David.
Yes, hello. Thanks very much, everybody. A slightly macro question, I suppose. But so I'm David Gow, and I'm a fellow here, but also I used to be the European business editor of the Guardian. You know, worked a lot in Europe. Anyway, my question is, often said here that about Scotland is that the problem of productivity is to do with capital. There isn't enough capital. The capital market is too small. But also, I wonder if actually the real issue here is much more about human capital and the absence of investment in human capital. And I wonder how much the panel would agree with that.
Okay, who wishes to start?
I think productivity isn't just about labour, it is definitely about the combination of land, labour and capital and human capital in that metric. I think we have a very highly educated population, David, as you know, probably more per head of the population than large parts of England. So it's something more than that we need to be thinking about, because we have an educated population. We don't necessarily have the jobs available for them to then make best use of those skills that they've developed, because we've got people doing jobs that are not necessarily postgraduate level jobs. So I think there's an issue about what's the capacity in Scotland, if we're talking about Scotland, to absorb the trained people that we have, if we're assuming traditional training is what we're looking, and the universities are developing. I think I don't want to get into the politics of it, but I think there's an issue around what's the market dimensions we're talking about. Is it UK or is it Scotland? And I think at the moment we have a UK market for use of that skilled labour, rather than just Scotland.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of questions online as well as in the room. So, but the point is right, and what Joe has said is that our labour force is very educated, and highly educated workforce is to some extent stuck in low-paid jobs. So the answer there is we have to produce highly paid jobs to be more effective, efficient, and produce that growth. And which is why consistently over the last 10 years, we've been in the lower quartile of OECD countries in terms of that productivity, and which is why. And that's where it comes to, your point about capital is right, because for innovation, you need investment. And which I quoted in the beginning, only 32% SMEs think they are innovation active. You need capital for that, otherwise you are firefighting. And in the times of such where we are reacting to the external business environment, that doesn't come. So adopting technology, training staff, keeping them up to date, and creating those high value, high quality jobs. I think those are the bigger challenges, which is why they are systemic challenges and organizational related challenges.
One of the things, if you look at any kind of Prosper's, oh, sorry, apologies. If you look at any of kind of Prosper's policy work, actually one of the things that we've encouraged, both the UK and Scottish Government to do in recent years is to invest in lifelong learning, and to invest in both our colleges and university sector. We've seen an erosion in real-term funding, particularly in the colleges sector, but also to some extent in the university sector. We need to be investing in the institutions and the systems to support that, but certainly on the lifelong learning, it's not been something that's had the same level of investment. And with changes in the workforce and the way that people are working, they don't necessarily stay in jobs for the same length of time. The best companies and organisations are the ones that want to learn and don't necessarily think they're the finished product. They need to keep adapting and actually there are things I think that can be done in the policy environment to incentivise and support that.
Thank you. I'll take the online question and then come to Ian.
Yeah, thank you, Poonam. We've got Jane online who asked, what surprised you most about the findings of the report?
I was thinking. Right, those of you who have read the report, was there anything in it which you think should be there and wasn't there, and something that appeared and wasn't expected? That's the question.
I suppose and this is a PeerWorks stroke Prosper kind of perspective, and it's part of the reason why the work's come about is, I mean, I think we've, you know, when we set PeerWorks up, and also, you know, it was really interesting to have the input of others. We had, you know, we had Graeme Roy at the table. We had Professor Stephen Roper from Warwick, who's done a lot of work on SMEs and sort of micro level productivity. And there's a lot of evidence behind this approach in terms of peer-to-peer working. I suppose the surprise, maybe not a surprise, but the kind of this frustration for us is that, you know, not just in Scotland or in the UK, that this kind of approach hasn't been adopted more enthusiastically.
We are not the people who like to talk to each other. Is that what you're saying? Okay. We should encourage. Amanda?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I'm not surprised, I'm going to say, by the findings of it. But I think part of that is because I think Scottishness and the scaredness of us as business owners to be that vulnerable piece. Like, I help and work with a lot of businesses, and I think, I don't know, I feel I'm lucky in some ways. I invest in a business coach. I do go to peer workplaces where I try and adopt this mindset, as you mentioned there, about learning all the time. But the businesses that I work with or I find across, you know, come interaction with, you see them almost putting a blocker up because they're scared of that vulnerability. And it's almost like this blindness that life could be easier. Business growth could be easier if they just open up. And I think more of that and more of it's okay to not have everything sorted, that mindset. I think that talking about it more, that, you know, to be successful doesn't mean that you can't make mistakes. Like, mistakes is part of the growth. And I think if we normalize that a lot more, it would help a lot more people to be open along the way.
Okay, can I push back on that to say, then if is that the only solution? And if that is there, then the other structural challenges can be managed, or is it the solution for the people related challenges?
I mean, I think it's part of a number of challenges that's there, because I think, again, I'm trying to reflect on a lot of the businesses that I work with as well, and see that, you know, everyone has that head down mentality of trying to work harder. You know, they're just trying to push against the wall further and further. And actually, it is about that reset, about coming back, about looking bigger, about being vulnerable, that they haven't maybe got the right solutions in place, whether that is people, processes, maybe even they've not fine-tuned their product. I don't know, but it's about that openness that it's not about just pushing harder to get growth. It's about resetting and looking at the bigger picture, I think.
Yeah, Ian, did you have a question? And then I'll come back to you.
Yeah, very good discussion. When the current government came in, they said their top priority was growth. Now, I just haven't seen anything to encourage growth. You know, one of the early things they did was apply national insurance charges to employers and give employees rights from day one. And all of that makes the cost of labour very high. Now, we have an unusual situation because we've been talking about productivity for 30 years. But actually, we now do have a magic bullet. We really have a magic bullet. I mean, I'm a computer scientist, so maybe I'm overemphasizing AI, but I've seen what it does. And it writes computer code better than computer science, you know, computer coders. And so, you know, Microsoft and Meta and Google and Salesforce are all cutting back on staff because they're much more productive. If you're doing research into something, it really does. It's like having a research assistant, but you're not paying for your research assistant. They go off and get you stuff and bring it back to you. I mean, it's fantastic. One of the companies I invest in does what you were just talking about, which is produce reports at the end that are nicely readable reports. So we have a magic bullet right now, and it could transform productivity. Now, what on earth could the government do to make this work? You know, you said lifelong learning, but I don't know we've talked about lifelong learning forever. We don't seem to do it. What could the government or our authorities or people do to give us the kind of advice we need? Because we all need different applications of AI, but we all need AI, you know. So what kind of system could be put into place that would make us adopt it properly?
Yeah, and that's a sort of serious question. As you say, we're all thinking that there is this magic bullet, which you agree that a lot of it can be done, which means that humans can be more efficient, anything that was repetitive long term. One of the things that you both highlighted is that knowing it to do, but how to do it and where to start is a big challenge for most people, those who are not computer scientists, because nowadays with open chat GPT and all, you don't even need to code. Some of those things are simple prompts and asking, but the systems and things that are there in the organizational issues. So, and in terms of learning, as we said, our workforce is already highly qualified. So it's not that they need to do university education or college. They need to do and apply it differently. And those are very different learning from because we already have a highly educated university numbers in this country. So in terms of their one specific answer from each of you, in terms of what intervention can government do, where ease or use of technology, specifically AI, will increase efficiency, if that's the question you're asking.
I've got a specific response to that, Ian, because we've been looking at partnering with the Scottish. So we've got, as you know, we've got capability in Scotland about using AI responsibly. We've got the Scottish AI Alliance. You know, it's a unique, set of people and capabilities that we could build on and grow. So we've been talking, and they've got this AI playbook that they've developed, which is, is a starting point for all sorts of sectors and organisations that says, this is how to start thinking about AI in your organisation. So, we've got a partnership with them in mind about sort of how we could use PeerWorks capability in terms of kind of creating those networks and that kind of like knowledge exchange across individuals. So that would be our one ask, is actually to sort of blend PeerWorks and the AI Alliance.
You have
yeah, I'm kind of a couple of examples. I'm chair of a couple of organisations, and as chair, I've been challenging the chief execs to think we're not using AI, or how could we be using AI? And the fear is that we'll bet the bank, we'll do something bad, and it'll be disastrous for the business. So the freedom's been given to go and play. Actually just start to use it in the business in a way that isn't betting the bank, but is actually giving individuals the chance to try it and use it to come forward with, we've done it a bit better. And because I think the use cases are not clear, and they're not going to be clear to people until they start to use it. So there's an element, how do you start to use it? Just use it, just play with it. And therefore there's a freedom and an acceptance that part of your day won't be billable, it will actually just be using it to try and find a way of you getting used to it and getting comfortable with it, and then coming forward with things. So I think in the next 12 months, I think there'll be a step change in a number of organisations where the freedom has been given to use it in a way that's safe.
So, does every organisation now needs an AI implementation officer? So if something goes wrong, that falls on his head or her.
The challenge I've got with asking what can the government do is I'm fed up asking the government. I think we've actually got to take responsibilities ourselves. Yeah. And secondly, it's about we shouldn't have an officer for it. We should all be doing it.
But the question is, everybody thinks, I don't know what to do, and who is the person who's telling, and that's where the problem comes, because you highlighted it, and even if you have an institute, they'll put a playbook within a business, who starts that? So we goes back. It's like everybody had a social media, all the jobs titles that were not there, I'm just creating one, sorry.
No, it's okay.
Your thoughts? You already talked about it. So.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's a problem that government can solve. In terms of business, it's just about getting the skills and the time to invest in developing those skills. It just does take time. And yeah, as we said, you want everyone to have it. And I think that we need to develop is a growth mindset. And we focus on entrepreneurs for a growth mindset as opposed to just everyone having that mindset as much as possible.
I agree with you that this is not AI. Government certainly cannot do it. Even for courses, even if it will be there on the website, the question is the businesses will have to take in thing. Right. Amanda, you wanted to contribute to this question? Or I do have 2 or 3 other questions in the room.
Well, I'm probably just adding to what they've said there, but I think it is. It's about we've got to take responsibility and learn to play with it. Like we have a weekly session where we just encourage everybody in the team to share with some sort of AI that they've used that week or played with. And because I think we're all waiting for the rule book to get past to us to then learn how to play with it. And it's not how it is. It's an assistant that will help us. And you just have to lean a little bit into the unknown and try things. And don't be scared to if it doesn't go right, okay, let's not use that bit. Right, do you know, it's about figuring it out and yeah, I suppose just not waiting for that rule book because it's going to be too late by then.
Apply for that. I suppose the blame game will have to stop somewhere or not pinpoint fingers. So I'll just take that and then this question and then.
Hi, my name's Emily. I'd like to ask Joe and Claire, how much of productivity do you think is actually linked to aspiration and the perception of self as a leader? Because I feel like a lot of the time we're one person bands, then we grow and we become accidental leaders. I mean, I hear accidental managers all the time, but actually I think accidental leaders is a thing. And a lot of the businesses that I work with, some B2B too, I don't see any aspiration. You know, it's I just want to survive. I want to be able to cover my salary or something. There's no real aspiration there. But is that linked to the perception of I'm a practitioner in my business or I am the leader of the business? And I read some really interesting research recently that said there's so much funding and energy and effort put into infrastructure around support that is learning and knowledge, but actually where the gap is emotional development of leaders. So are there plans for this? Because I feel that could be a bit of a gap. Sorry.
Thank you. Quick fire answer from both of you.
Very quickly, I think some of the, probably didn't articulate, some of the PeerWorks sessions are about kind of leadership and management and how you implement change in your business. I don't think...
That sounds objective though, you know, it all feels very objective, so where's the softer subjective stuff coming in, you know? Because you talked about manufacturing and how it was easy in manufacturing house because it was objective. The service sector is more people and much more subjective. So, like, what is there that's around the meta skills and all of these other things?
Yeah, well, I can see my colleague Eleonora is desperate to come in, so I'm going to let Eleonora, who
head of PeerWorks. So something that I can see through PeerWorks, and obviously we have some case studies here. I don't know whether it's true or not, but I think the good, the positive of PeerWorks is that aspirational, because you see other leaders doing amazing things, and you get inspired by them. So that is something that probably can trigger the fact that you want more, not just being a practitioner within the business, but actually do more and see what others are doing and get inspired and think about what else can be done that is not just the day-to-day, but is more not just strategic, but who you want to be as a business. So I think this is what PeerWorks is doing at the moment. This is what I can see. So.
Sorry, one thing I will just add quickly is that not everyone that comes is like the business owner, so quite often it's somebody else, and I think as you alluded to, sometimes it's other change makers in their businesses that will go back and go, you know, and we know in our business sometimes it's the younger members of the business that go to an event and they come back and go, why are we not doing this sort of thing? So it's kind of, I think maybe it sounds a bit grand, but, you know, we want to kind of create a movement of people who are, well, you know, want to go out and share the message about change.
I think what you're touching on is that productivity is the result of people being holy themselves as well, and then they are using other things that are being there. So how people are more resilient, how they are aspirational, how they are growth, and that contributes to that growth. So it's going back to where we started, because if that mindset is not there, you'll not be going for it, but you need other things without that, because good leaders, in the absence of other resources, will still not be able to do, and it's a combination of things. I think Michael has a question there, so Eleonora, and then we'll come to front again. Sorry, I'm eating into your drinks time.
Thank you. Michael Robatsis, University of Edinburgh. So it was very interesting to hear, because I'm an AI person, it was very interesting to hear how everybody thinks AI is going to, create the big productivity gains. I'd love for that to be the case in some feature. But when I talk to a lot of organizations, what I find out is that yes, everybody can learn about new technologies and so on, but actually the real hard work is in the transformation. And transformation is hard enough. Most of our organizations haven't even managed with normal digital. And it's hard enough for corporates. So much harder still for SMEs that don't have the cycles or the money to pay the consultants and so on. So I'm wondering, have we, and what PeerWorks is doing certainly helps in that respect, but do we fundamentally lack a transformation support infrastructure and mechanism that would come with the right funding mechanism and so on? Because the problem I see, even if you have capital, how are you going to demonstrate to the investor what the benefit is going to be before you've even started the transformation? So, I'm thinking, do we have to think about a completely different set of support mechanisms?
So and it's good coming from an AI person to say we don't need a chief AI person, we need a chief transformation person. So, okay, thoughts on that? Naturally, that's where question is. There's a human aspect, there's a capital aspect, there's a resource aspect, and then there is marrying it all up aspect so that they work with a well-oiled machinery. Is this the transformation issue going back to the same point of ages of back?
I think it's a really good point. From our business, we don't know the questions to ask, let alone the answers that we want to get from it. And up until very recently, I kind of looked at AI almost like a kind of two-tier system where there was a small cohort of people who just got it, the leaders, they were the experts, and then everyone else, 99%. I've changed that slightly. I think it's a three-tier system now because I took my daughter to an event, she's 11, and she was like, I'm learning this in school, Dad. So they know it. The bulk in the middle don't, and then there's a small cohort at the top. But the issue for us as an organisation is that we are playing about with it, just like Amanda said, and we're trying to learn, but we don't really know what we don't know. So we're almost going into it blind. And I think your point about that guidance and support to try and direct us to where we need to be would be really, really helpful for us. Otherwise, there'll be a lot of dead ends and a lot of time wasted. We might still get there, but it'll take a lot longer.
So is your point, Michael, is that the AI is not going to solve it because you need how to apply it into the business, and it's going back to the same issue?
Well, it's also about, what does a mechanism look like that scales, the kind of the innovation infrastructure, because not everybody can pay to do this in their small business for their own journey. At the same time, there isn't an off-the-shelf product that, I'm just going to buy this and it's going to solve my problem if I don't even know what the problem is. Or I might know what the problem is, but you don't know whether there's a solution or whether AI is the solution. So my question is, what could something look like that goes maybe a little bit deeper than just putting your foot in the water and learning a little bit and actually getting that guidance? And how could we, between government and industry and maybe also universities or, experts, fund that and make that happen to really, for our whole economy to benefit from AI?
And again, because of the size of the businesses, resources available, the gaps that are there for each understanding, the question that will come is, will these be sectoral specific things because they are going there, so verticals, or will they be process specific because everybody does email, everybody talks HR, everybody talks finance, and then, so there is probably intersectionality, but be interested to know anybody who.
Okay, it's not a question, I'm just going to weigh in, sorry. So I don't work in an SME. Well, I suppose I do, actually. I'm a consultant, so I'm a one-person SME. But I used to work for a very big global corporation, and a few weeks ago, I was at an alumni event with a whole lot of other people who work for huge corporations, and they were talking for a whole day about AI, and some principles appeared, and they were very simple and clear and not difficult to understand. And the first was, don't try to do it everywhere at once. Pick one business process, pick the one where the money is tied up and make that more effective. Free up some money and then take that money and put it into the next one that you want to do. 2, to your point, make sure it's something that's scalable. If you're going to do a pilot, you're only a small company, so it's probably scalable, or you have to do one, you don't have to do a massive pilot. But, you know, try to make sure whatever you start with is something you can flow out to other places. 3, as leaders, start using it yourself and role modeling the use of it. So start playing it with yourself and learning it and making other people feel comfortable with it. And then the other one, which is really important, is don't stick it on top of systems that are already broken, because it won't help.
Business advice, but follow the practicalities of that. And I think that those are the summary points. Good. Did you have a question? And I think after that, I should break because we are 20 minutes into the drinks time.
Mark Schotter at Sunbird Consulting. Just a very quick point on skills and understanding the applications of AI. I mean, not talking about specialist AI computer scientists, but generalists that come through university, either engineers or whatever it happens to be, who have used AI through that educational program. We've probably only had maybe 1 or 2 or maybe 3 cohorts of graduates that have come through with a really good grasp of that for a specific field. So is it only a matter of time where we're going to get, you know, over the next 2 or 3 years, where hiring young people, bringing them into the business, they're going to be the champions of AI, and we should be, you know, targeting those people and ensuring that they fit that role within the organization.
That's an excellent point that you are talking about. It's marrying the themes that have appeared, though that AI is a solution, but implementation, transformation, understanding that is a challenge. So how do you, is it universities or colleges that are going to produce this, or is it going to be within businesses that are applied aspects? Yeah, exactly, because this is not somebody learning it. So any final thoughts on that? Anybody wants to?
Yeah, I think it's a good point. But I guess the difficulty I see as an SME is that they will just be sucked up by the big corporations because they've got much more to do that needs done and the money to pay for it. So,
I was just going to add one thing. I mean, I had a conversation with someone recently who said, if you're not using AI in your organisation, you're already way behind. And it really kind of like, you know, it made me think about it. And I think that's the message that every SME, you know, I think for larger corporations it is more difficult because they might be looking at, you know, it's not, AI is not the same thing for everyone. You've got your generic models and sort of bespoke models that are doing specific things in healthcare or finance or whatever. But for small businesses, actually, there's a lot you can do with AI. And I sort of agree with Joe. I think so much is going to change. I mean, the big corporations are already embedding AI, so you don't have to think about going somewhere else to, you know, they're putting it into all the software that most small businesses use on a daily basis. You're already getting the benefits of AI happening, and I do think it's going to happen so quickly. So it's just making a start and yeah, role modelling. But I think the rest will happen very quickly.
Thank you, Amanda. Any point from you?
I think for me it is about that role modeling piece. Like I think for me, I think a lot of the team really struggled at the very beginning because they felt like they were cheating. Do you know? And it's like, and it didn't matter what it was, what part of AI it was, right, that we were talking about. Like one of the most manual things we can do is creating alt tags and stuff like that. And there's like an AI tool that can help us. It's a really manual, boring task, some of that, right? And it's like cut down the manpower of that so dramatically. But I think it took them a little bit, the fact that it was cheating. And I was like, I want you to use your time for something more strategic, something that uses a different part of your brain than just sitting there doing some sort of almost, quite frankly, once you've got the keyword in place, an administrative almost task. Do you know? And there's lots of processes like that. And I think it's part of it was empowering them to realize that their value, their input into the business wasn't based on them delivering on some of these manual bits. Do you know? I don't know if that makes sense, but I think like it's allowing them to realize that they still had so much to give. Their job isn't a threat. It's about upskilling and moving into other areas that they don't have the capacity to do because they're bogged down with the administrative elements of it. So it's about empowering them and leading them.
Thank you. Means I suppose if you spend 5 hours or something and if you can get a report in 5 minutes, then you feel like you've not done your day's job and you've been cheating. That's what in the schooling and the universities we are feeling.
Yes.
But that's been a wonderful question. I realize there are a couple of questions. There are drinks next doors. There will be speakers. Please head to that because I don't want to take up your drinks time. It's been a wonderful discussion. Please give your thanks to all the speakers. It's been an amazing discussion. And thank you for you all to coming and participating. It's been an engaging discussion. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. So thank you very much. And